Welcome to Jets Overtime, presented by Duncan. Our NFL Draft defensive preview is underway. Eric Allen and Brian Balding here in the studio. We're joined by Leger Douzable as well. Coming up, we're going to check in with Caroline Hendershot, Ethan Greenberg. The Jets have the 13th overall selection in the 2023 NFL Draft. And right now, Baldy, they do have a pair in rounds 2, number 42 and number 43 overall, so they could choose to address defense early.
Look, I mean, there's some elite prospects in this draft led by Will Anderson Jr. from Alabama, Jalen Carter from Georgia. They won't be there 13th, but there's some great depth at edge pass rushers. You can find corners. You can find a few safeties in this draft. 3 of the top 43 picks, they're going to have a choice of some good players.
Leger, bottom line, the Jets' defense was a great story last season. They totally flipped the script.
Yeah, they definitely did, EA. And the good thing about the Jets' defense is a lot of the pieces are coming back right now. You did lose 2 D tackles and Nate Shepard, and then you also lost Sheldon Rankins, right? But they did sign Quentin Jefferson, who could help you as far as pass rushing inside. I think the Jets will need one more piece inside to pair with those other 2 D tackles. With Quentin Williams and Quentin Jefferson. I think Keanu Benton could be a name they look at in the second round.
How about Deuce? He's getting greedy along that defensive line. Baldy, last year in the draft, Joe Douglas selected Jermaine Johnson, moved up in the first round to get him. Then in the 4th round, you got Michael Clemens out of Texas A&M, but it all started with the Sauce man, Sauce Gardner.
I mean, look, he was just a special player. I mean, from week 1 against the Baltimore Ravens throughout the season, you couldn't get the ball over his head. His length, his speed, his route running ability. But what it comes down to is Sauce had a combination of great talent and he loves the game. And that comes through the way he practices, he prepares, game day, and it showed up throughout the season.
He's right, Deuce. Gardner unlocked the key for the defense that became one of the best in football. Remember, in 2021, they were worst across the board, then top 5 in basically every metric last season.
Yeah, you know, pass rush and coverage working together. I think Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed allowed that defensive line to really start hunting. I think it was week 4 when Quentin Williams got into it with Aaron White cotton on the sideline. And from there on, right, put it on the defensive line. When you have corners that you trust on the island out there, it's easy to do that. And when you have, you know, the depth that you have at defensive line and you got corners that can hold up on the outside, it's hard for offenses to block you because you're talking about 6 to 8 rushers constantly coming at you, but your corners allow you to do that.
Baldy, Robert Saleh talked about the importance of basically running it back as much as the Jets possibly can, and they had a key offseason re-signing in Quincy Williams because he did not hit the market. And then Douglas sends a 7th-round pick in 2024 for a starting safety in Chuck Clark.
Look, I mean, you look at Chuck Clark. I mean, what he's done in Baltimore over 6 years. Like, he's a playmaker. He's down the box. He's a sure tackler. You can count on Chuck to be able to line up, help you get lined up, and play a variety of positions. Those are good signings that adds depth to this defense. The one thing I would say, and I think Leger would agree, is take the ball away more. I want to see the Jets at the top of the food chain here in the NFL and takeaways at the end of the season.
While the Jets prepare for the 2023 NFL Draft at One Jets Drive, veterans arrived at the facility earlier this week for the start of Phase 1 of the voluntary 9-week off-season program. Phase 1 will cover 2 weeks with activities limited to meetings, strength and conditioning, and physical rehabilitation. While it's the Jets' off-season number 2 for guys like Tyler Conklin, Breece Hall, and Jordan Whitehead, Whitehouse McCole Hardman Jr. and Alan Lazard are running new routes here in Florham Park. Fans, come out to MetLife Stadium on April 27th at 7 p.m. for the 2023 New York Jets Draft Party presented by Verizon. Watch the draft live on the field, tour the locker room, and enjoy games with family and friends. Download your free tickets at nyjets.com/draft party. Coming up, Caroline Hendershot and Brian Balding will break down some defenders ready to wreak havoc on the next level.
Jets Overtime is presented by Duncan. The Jets run on Duncan. Welcome back into Jets Overtime. I'm Caroline Hendershot, joined by Brian Baldinger to break down some of the 2023 prospects. Now, Baldy, let's review some defensive line players that stand out to you in this class. Let's start first with defensive end Nolan Smith out of Georgia, who ran a 4.39 at the Combine.
Say it one more time, Carol.
4.39.
Yeah. So he's a blur. You know, when he comes off the edge here, right here, he's going to beat the tight end and then the tackle. Like, he's working with Chuck Smith down in Atlanta right now on his pass rush. And I hear some amazing things. Because right here, that ability to bend his ankles, to turn the corner, to get to the quarterback and finish is what really everybody's looking for in this draft right now.
Right, exactly what you want from a D-end. Okay, what about another D-end who led Iowa in tackles for loss, sacks, and block punts this season in Lucas Van Ness?
So Van Ness is an interesting guy because when you watch him, like here he is off the edge right here, okay? Now, his ability, he can play any defensive line position. We call him an end right here. He's lined up here against the #1 pass protector in this draft in Peter Skoronski. And this is, you're going to see his power. He's 6'5", long arms, 275 pounds. He's going to take Skoronski down on his way to getting to the quarterback. So he's a guy that can line up anywhere. He's good at running twist stunts. He's got tremendous movement about him. And he's a prospect that, you know, he never started a game at Iowa, but he played a lot to accumulate all those stats you just talked about. But he's a guy that everybody's so excited about because of what he can do at the next level. And
to mow down Peter Skoronski like he did is not an easy feat. Skoronski is a big dude. But now let's switch to defensive tackles and start with Kalijah Cansey, who had 27.5 tackles for loss over 25 games the last 2 seasons at the University of Pittsburgh.
Well, you're going to watch this. I'm going to try to slow it down here. But Kalijah Cansey, I can't help that watching Aaron Donald 9 years ago and think of the same guy. He's almost exactly the same physically, but you can see, like, he's got Aaron Donald type of moves. Like, that's a cross chop to get past the guard, through the tackle, and then get to the running back, knock the running back down, and then get to the quarterback. He is a disruptor. No matter where you put him, he can penetrate. He's got an array of pass rush moves, and I just think it's going to transfer to the NFL.
I mean, mentioning him and Aaron Donald even in the same sentence is a massive compliment. But finally, let's talk about defensive tackle Brian Brzee out of Clemson, who's overcome a lot of adversity the last 2 years, including tearing his ACL.
Yeah, and he came back from that really good this year because you watch him right here, and he's 6'5", he's 305 pounds, and he can bend. He can turn the corner. He can play inside. He can probably play outside as well. But he's a guy that's got a bright future. And all these players we're talking about right now are going to be playmakers at the next level.
Especially when you see someone of his size and stature, that's exactly what you want on your D-line. But Baldy, thank you so much for all of those breakdowns and giving us an inside look at the prospects. Coming up, you'll hear from Eric Allen and Leger Douzabal about more defensive draft prospects.
Welcome back to Jets Overtime, presented by Dunkin'. You just heard from Brian Baldinger breaking down some of the top options along the defensive line, but let's take a look at the current Jets landscape because the Jets have a healthy rotation at defensive end. A lot of these guys, though, like John Franklin Myers, like Michael Clemens, they play both inside and outside. But if you take a look at the interior, it wouldn't be surprising if the Jets added some beef here. Now, Joe Douglas did sign Quentin Jefferson the other week, who has position versatility, but maybe he and the Jets want to add a long-term solution next to Quinnen Williams.
Great job, Greens. Deuce, the Jets could look to get younger at defensive tackle. We know they have all-world player Quinnen Williams in there. They just signed Quentin Jefferson. He's going to be added to the rotation, a veteran. Is there any chance that Jalen Carter falls to number 13 overall?
EA, if Jalen Carter falls to 13, as soon as the Jets are on the clock, that ticket needs to be punched in right away. I don't see, honestly, Jalen Carter falling past pick number 10. And honestly, I think he's the best fit for the Seattle Seahawks at the number 5 spot. I think that's where he's going to actually go. So if he was able to fall to 13, EA, read my lips. Joe D, as soon as they say Jets on the clock, turn the ticket in, have Goodell come out and say the name right away.
Are there any guys elsewhere that you're looking at that potentially could fall to the Jets, either in rounds 1 or 2?
Yeah, you look at Northwestern, Tommy Adebawore, who has some versatility. I really like this guy. He's one of my favorite players in the draft. Believe ran in the 4.5 at the combine at 285 pounds. And when you talk about Robert Saleh and his scheme, right, when he looks at defensive linemen, he looks at foot, speed, and strain, and that's what you get from him. I think a lot of people didn't know where he would play, but at the Senior Bowl, dominated at the 3 technique position. I think that's where he's going to translate in the NFL. And then Keanu Benton, too, is a guy that was unblockable at the Senior Bowl. Plays really well with his hands as far as knocking blockers back and disengaging and getting in the backfield, and also gives you pass rush ability from the inside from Wisconsin. So those are 2 guys that will most likely be there in the second round. Now, Adebawore could slip into the first round, but I think Benton will be there in the second round.
How about give me a couple finishers in this draft class, guys who take the football away?
Guys that take from the football away, I mean, Tyree Wilson is one, the defensive end from Texas Tech. He's a guy, and not the Jets would be looking at defensive end because they are so deep there, but he's a guy that's a monster, EA. I think he stands 6'6", 6'7", 276 pounds. I think he can even grow in that frame. With those long arms, he just has a knack for knocking the ball away from the quarterback. And then at linebacker, right, Jack Campbell is a guy that I really like as far as, I know he's the typical, not the typical size linebacker. He's kind of an old school feel linebacker at 6'5", almost 250 pounds. But this guy runs well. I know he ran 4.65 at the combine, but he runs a lot faster, and his instincts is what separate him, EA. He just knows where to be and where to be and where the ball's going to be. His one-handed interception versus Ohio State was a thing of beauty. So he's a guy also that when he gets to the ball, he does a good job of trying to knock the ball away as well.
How about body types when you're talking about Robert Saleh in this scheme? Let's go beyond the defensive line because the Jets are pretty much set there. Obviously, they're going to get more bodies in here, but I'm thinking more along the linebacker position.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because if you look at the scheme, right, even when he was in San Francisco going back to when he was in Seattle, they're usually smaller linebackers. We even saw C.J. Mosley lose some weight to fit into the scheme because you got to be able to run sideline to sideline, and you got to be able to take that tight end down the seam. If you look at what, the 49ers have a linebacker with Dre Greenlaw and also Fred Warner, both of those guys weigh about 230, 235, right? But they're physical linebackers that hit, run, and can carry guys. So you look at guys like Trenton Simpson, he's in that mold from Clemson, a really good cover guy. You also look at Dorian Williams from Tulane, who's also a good fit in this scheme, and I think could potentially be there in the 3rd, 4th round. Now, the Jets don't have a 3rd round pick currently. We'll see what happens during draft day. But DeMario Overshown is a guy I really love as well, and I think he fits that mold. Former safety, right? And you see a lot of that in this Robert Saleh scheme. Former safeties that moved to linebacker. Let's not forget, Jamian Sherwood a few years ago was a former safety as well. And Nasruddin, too, was a former safety that they moved to linebacker. I think he'll fit in this scheme as well, too.
You don't want to go away because we'll look at some mock drafts next, and we'll also deliver our final thoughts.
The Jets are ready to take flight, and you can be there for every game this season. Lock in your season tickets to experience the action and energy of a Jets game day at MetLife Stadium. You'll also get exclusive season ticket holder benefits you can't find anywhere else. For more information, visit nyjets.com/season tickets. Welcome back into Jets Overtime. Now we're going to take a look at some of the mock drafts. So looking at the mock drafts from a defensive perspective, we see Daniel Jeremiah choosing defensive end Nolan Smith, Bucky Brooks choosing defensive tackle Brian Brzee, and Charles Davis choosing defensive tackle Kalijah Kancey. Now, Ethan, while 2 of these guys are going on the inside, Daniel Jeremiah going on the outside, if the Jets are just looking at any defensive lineman, who are they going to take a look at on day 2 or day 3? Yeah,
well, you know that Robert Saleh, if he has the opportunity to add any defensive lineman, whether that's an edge or a tackle, you know he's going to want to do it. So to your point, let's stay in the 2nd round range because a guy that stands out to me, B.J. Ojulari out of LSU. His brother Aziz plays for the Giants across town, but B.J. plays with intensity. 20 tackles for loss and 103 quarterback pressures over 24 games the past 2 seasons. Only 2 FBF players had more in that span. He's not the biggest guy at 6'2", 248 pounds, but he can get after the quarterback. Here's a height-weight comparison. Bryce Huff, when he was coming out of Memphis, 6'1", 254. Now, Ojulari, a more touted prospect than Huff, who went undrafted, but that's just a size comparison that's somewhat similar through the Jets lens. And also, you mentioned defensive tackle earlier, at least through Bucky Brooks and Charles Davis. Keanu Benton is a guy that Dane Brugler mentioned to me as an option for the Jets in the second round, and here's what Brugler had to say about the big man out of Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin native, 6'4", 310 pounds. And I think that when you look at the Jets scheme and what they want up front, they want guys that can stop the run, but also can give you a little bit of that upfield disruption. And that's Keanu Benton. It's him as more of an interchangeable tackle. You want to play the nose. You want to play over the B gap. He can do those things, and you're not drafting a specific position-specific player with Keanu Benton. He gives you some of that versatility.
While that covers the defensive line, what other positions on defense could you see the Jets targeting in the draft?
Well, I feel like with the draft, you kind of have to expect the unexpected. But with that being said, I'm looking at safety and linebacker because the Jets have two veterans in the back end of their secondary at safety with Jordan Whitehead and Chuck Clark. They also have young players like Ashton Davis, like Tony Adams, an undrafted free agent from last year. But maybe the Jets want to add another young body to the mix there. Now at linebacker, you think about where the Jets were week 1 of the regular season last year. C.J. Mosley, Quincy Williams, Quan Alexander. 2/3 of those guys are back, C.J. Mosley and Quincy Williams, but who's going to be the guy in a base defense for Quan Alexander, who's on the street as a free agent right now? Could it be Jamien Sherwood? Could it be Hamza Nasruddin? Absolutely. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's somebody in the draft. Maybe it's somebody like Drew Sanders, Trenton Simpson, Deion Henley. There are a lot of options, and whether that's day 1, day 2, or day 3, it wouldn't really surprise me whichever direction the Jets went, because the draft is all about building for the future, not necessarily filling your roster with what you need right now.
Right. It never hurts to add a body into the position room because all it does is increase inter-squad competition. So there's a lot of different ways this could shake out. We'll just have to wait till draft night.
Thanks, Caroline and Ethan. Baldy, when you look at the Jets, when you look at the defensive roster, do you think they have long-term needs? Not immediate, more long-term at linebacker and safety.
Well, you got to decide what you're going to do with C.J. Mosley, who's just, your quarterback of your defense. Quan Alexander filled in a role when guys were out. They've got 3 right there, but I feel like you just have to always look at getting younger. And you can always find ways to get those guys on the field, whether it's special teams, spot duty, things like that. Like, I think it's a position that they should look at.
Deuce, you're not a huge fan overall of the safety class, are you?
Nah, not at all. Me and Baldy were kind of talking about this off the camera. I think the Jets still need a ball-hawking safety. I think Chuck Clark and also, Jordan Whitehead will compete to see who's going to be more of the strong safety in this defense. But, it's tough, right? Because the draft it doesn't have great depth at the safety position. Now, that's going to push a lot of guys up, but it's not a class that, like last year's class, where you feel more comfortable taking a guy in the first or second round at safety. The safety class this year, besides Brian Branch, you might go late first, maybe early second. There's not a guy that you're going to take in the first or second round probably in this draft.
Baldy, put the GM cap on right now. If you're making a fantasy selection, who would you want to see on this Jets defense?
Right now, look, if you could get Lucas Van Ness, like he's a guy that didn't even start at Iowa, but when you look at his measurables, his size, his production at Iowa, and the way that he plays, like he might be there at 13. I don't think you can ever have enough great edge rushers. And really, when you watch him, he can play anywhere on the defensive front. So that's a guy that I would keep my eye on. I like watching him play.
What do you think about the edge possibilities, Deuce, for the Jets in rounds 1 or 2?
I don't see it happening just because of the depth of the defensive line. You talk about Carl Lawson, Bryce Huff, who got the tender from the Jets, and then also Michael Clemens and also Jermaine Johnson, who they took in the first round, are looking to get more reps as they played really well in reserve roles last year. But never say never, right? I didn't think the Jets would draft Michael Clemens after taking Jermaine Johnson in the first round, even though they were deep at the edge position. Let's not also forget, John Franklin Myers is their best run defender, has the possibility to kick inside on third downs, but he also has the versatility to rush on the outside. So I just don't think it's a major need, to Baldy's point, right? Especially Robert Saleh. He loves having enough defensive linemen. I just think at the edge position, the Jets are set right now. Bradley Anae is a guy that I really like and they really like on practice squad. I think he'll have an opportunity this year as well. I think they look somewhere else in the first 2 rounds.
Well, I'm excited. The 2023 NFL Draft is less than a week away. Make sure you tune in following the draft because we're going to have a special breakdown of all the Jets selections on Jets Overtime.